Again, as I said, and this is probably where the video cut off, again, as I said, you know, to say that you're just purely a hedonist, right, and I'm just interested in sexual pleasure and sexual gratification and lustful gratification and indulgence for the sake of just being hedonic pleasure, yeah, you might be a hedonist. Properly speaking, however, I wouldn't say that you are an occultist, especially an LHP occultist, because you're not doing it for the purpose of enlightenment, for the purpose of liberation, for the purpose of, at its most extreme and its highest forms, it's known as apotheosis, right? Divination. The divination of the individual in a recognition, in an embrace of the oneness of God, right? So Crowley having his mistress defecate and then eating that defecation isn't an act of just sexual perversion for the sake of sexual perversion. He believes insofar as he is attached to the very thing which he should be disassociated from, that he is embracing the Godhead, right? Obviously, sexual pleasures and sexual desires, and all of this allows the devotee or the practitioner access to the one, right? I attain my path, and hence the path. I attain my path to liberation, to enlightenment, through embracing the attachment. And we see that this is what, and this is just gross generalizations, but I have to make this intelligible. We see that this is what Anakin Skywalker did in the Star Wars trilogy, right? He didn't want to accept the inherency of death within all human existence, and he wanted to defy the laws. And insofar as he wanted to defy the laws, he had to embrace a path of attempting to basically make the laws his, have the laws, bend to his will, right? So that there is a sense in which we can talk about LHP in this attempt to embrace and recognize our attachment. Some of the characteristics that define the LHP are carnality, externality, indulgence, attachment. These concepts in varying degrees, here being like sort of the median, right, in varying degrees constitute LHP. Now, granted, you can have an LHP, and this wouldn't be a problem at all, you could have an LHP occultist that is simply attached to and embracing the arts, and an LHP occultist who uses aesthetic modes of representation and aesthetic modes of enlightenment, if you will, so that, you know, I drink wine and I might dabble in illegal drug use, so that my mind is elevated and opened, so that I can attain some creative energy, if you will, right? Some creative energy from this one, and then use that and manifest it in my work, right? So that I become a conduit, if you will, for that creative energy. Well, that would be a very, very mild, sort of modest version of left-hand path, of a left-hand path practitioner. What that left-hand path practitioner is doing is attaching him or herself to the world for the purpose of attaining some enlightenment. I'm attaching myself to the arts. I'm attaching myself maybe to a bottle of wine, or a few bottles of wine, right? It's in this state of euphoria and intoxication with the things around me, I attain a sense of enlightenment. Again, a more extreme version might be, you know, necrophagia, right? I mean, eating dead people, right? That's, you know, the thing is supposed to be rejected, or eating feces, as we've seen and as I quoted, right? There are varying degrees of this. So again, I wanted to give a total account, and it's not the case that all LHP practitioners have to go to the point of, you know, ingesting defecation. That's pretty hardcore. But it is a count that there are varying degrees all the way along the line. But what will definitely happen, no matter what range of the spectrum, if you're going this way, then you are attempting to arrive at some sense of understanding, enlightenment, through attaching yourself to the things in the world, right? And I showed you several times through several passages this understanding. So at its most extreme, the quote is at the very bottom right here. The quote is, a transcendence of all moral boundaries and material distinctions, such that even the most defiling substance becomes divine. And I talked about that in the most extreme sense. So that's the LHP path to the one, Now, the RHP path to the one, right? In the RHP path, the RHP, more properly stated, the white light practitioner of the occult, recognizes that my path to enlightenment, my path to understanding, isn't going to come in my attachments, right? I do recognize, it's undeniable to say that I am a sexual being, that I have come into existence because of sexual reproduction, and insofar as I have, that death becomes an inherent characteristic in my identity as human beings, as sexual beings. Again, as Martin Heidegger says, we are beings toward death. Death is an aspect of our individuation, of our politics of identity. Death is in us, right? Properly speaking, as I said before, the notion of the living dead isn't really the spooky zombie. We are all the living dead. Death inheres within our life, right? Without death in us, we really aren't alive. So it's this, again, it's this I'm alive but I'm dead, you know, the one that is one extreme and the other. What ends up happening is, insofar as I recognize that we are being towards death, this creates attachments to us. This creates bonds. And again, the example was Anakin's attachment to Princess Amidala. Now, the distinction between the RHP practitioner on the most extreme pole versus the LHP practitioner on the other pole is that the RHP practitioner, or the white light occultist, rather than foregoing or embracing rather these connections, right, and this lustful desire and indulgences and carnality in order to sort of elevate back up the wrong, we recognize, and if you look in the picture, I did this deliberately, I sort of split the head in two different colors, black and white, just like the one, right? We look at our existence, and this goes back to the piece that I quoted from Plato, right? We recognize that the one is manifest within us all. The citation at the top of the page says, again, among all these parts, there cannot be any which is part of being and yet not a one part. Being, big B, in a Heideggerian sense, and I didn't go into a discourse on Heidegger, but being in the big B is manifest within us as individuals. So there's part of this one, right? If we say that the left-hand path is the dark side, just sort of like generalizing, then there's part of that dark side within all of us. And both practitioners recognize that. So that means within me, there is a reflection. I am a smaller reflection. Remember when I did the first principle and then sort of the manifestation of the first principle outward? Well, there is then a manifestation of the eternal within me as an individual. So rather than embracing attachments, I forego attachments. I embrace aestheticism and go through this deliberate process of sort of self-reflection, right? Where I reflect back on myself, right? So if this is where I am, and you know, I'm a smaller image, a monad, if you will, of the one force, instead of going back up the rungs of the ladder and embracing attachments, embracing death, embracing our sexuality, I forego all of that through this process of aestheticism, and I look into myself to recognize the fact that I am just like this, right? I am a mirror image, really in the Leibnizian sense, I'm a mirror image of the one primal force, right? The one Godhead, the one supreme being, whatever that thing might be, right? So that we both arrive, both the LHP practitioner and the RHP, or the white light occultist, arrive at a sense of liberation. Remember, this liberation is Kavalia. I'll arrive at Kavalia through my aestheticism. And in foregoing, I arrive at purity, internality. So you can see the distinctions, right? LHP, carnality versus purity. Externality, engaging with the external world. Internality. Indulgence, aestheticism. And the quote here from Patanjali is, the highest form of detachment is achieved in the mind ceasing to act. The seer is said to be in a state of Kavalia, or liberation. Right? So I arrive at, if my approach is not just enlightenment, but it's also, you know, divination, apotheosis, then I arrive at my